You probably think you're a law-abiding citizen. But what if I told you that flying a kite, giving away free zucchini, or even singing Christmas carols could get you thrown in a holding cell? Today, we explore 49 moments where common sense was arrested right along with the American people for things that are, for all intents and purposes, completely legal. 1. In Bakersfield, California, some folks decided to form a pop-up choir to spread Christmas cheer door to door. A beautiful, festive tradition, right? Wrong. One neighbor, apparently auditioning for the role of the Grinch, called the police. When the officers arrived, they weren't there to harmonize. They demanded to see a solicitation permit for singing. The choir, failing to produce a license for their own vocal cords, saw their entire soprano section arrested for producing commercial sound without a license. Apparently, the sweet sound of Silent Night is now a taxable service. They spent the night in a holding cell, learning that in some parts of America, fa-la-la-la-la-la can get you a criminal record. 2. A Madison, Wisconsin yogi named Sheila had a simple, wholesome idea: lead a sunrise meditation session on the Capitol lawn. What could be more peaceful? Well, to a security team, a group of people sitting quietly looked less like enlightenment and more like an unauthorized insurrection. They insisted that any public gathering, even one whose main goal is to breathe, requires a protest permit. Police were called to issue disorderly assembly citations. As the cuffs clicked, Sheila's serene chant of "Om" quickly devolved into a panicked, "Oh no, ma'am, please." It's a valuable lesson. If you want to find inner peace in a public space, you'd better clear it with the government first. 3. Reese, a dad in Knoxville, was enjoying a timeless evening activity, flying a homemade box kite with his kid. As it soared against the dusk sky, a vigilant FAA spotter mistook the harmless toy for a hostile drone. This triggered a response you'd expect for an international incident. Police descended on the park, seized the kite string as if it were a weapon, and cited Reese for operating an unregistered aircraft. A father-son bonding moment was instantly turned into a federal aviation crime. One can only imagine Reese trying to explain to his child that their paper and sticks had violated restricted airspace. 4. At the Minneapolis Farmers Market, there's a golden rule. All produce must hail from within a 30-mile radius. Vendor Elise brought a batch of delicious apples from her aunt's orchard, located a scandalous 32 miles away. This 2-mile discrepancy was treated like a major felony. Inspectors flagged her stall for fraudulent origin, and deputies were called to confiscate the outlaw apples. Elise was hauled off to spend her Saturday in a holding cell, contemplating her life of cross-county fruit smuggling. The apples were taken to an evidence locker, their crisp testimony forever silenced by geography. 5. During a Philadelphia Eagles tailgate, a fan named Vince unveiled his masterpiece, a parabolic grill that cooked food using only the power of concentrated mirrors. He was a god of grilling, a titan of tailgating. But the fire marshals saw things differently. Baffled by a device with no actual fire, they improvised and declared that concentrated sunlight legally qualifies as an open flame. The entire parking lot was designated a burn zone, and Vince was arrested. His solar-powered dream was extinguished, and his fellow fans were forced to eat cold cheesesteaks while mourning the death of innovation. 6. An Austin produce stand operated on a charming honor system. Pilar, a graduate student with an overabundance of zucchini, decided to add her surplus to the stand. To make sure they found a home, she wrote "free" on the chalkboard price list. This act of pure generosity was promptly reported to the police as tampering with posted rates. Officers arrived, arrested Pilar, and hauled her away in cuffs. The zucchini, the cause of the whole incident, remained at the stand, untouched, unsold, and a symbol of a world where you can get arrested for trying to give away vegetables. 7. A sweet retiree in Santa Fe set up a tiny "take a plant, leave a plant" shelf on her porch to build a bit of community. People loved it. The zoning officers, however, did not. They stormed in and declared the innocent shelf to be an unregulated nursery. They impounded the succulents as if they were seizing narcotics and arrested the woman for selling flora without a license, even though not a single dollar was ever exchanged. Her prize cactus spent the night in an evidence locker, probably wondering if it would get a phone call. 8. For his granddaughter's wedding, 87-year-old Earl from rural Kansas painted his barn a magnificent, celebratory shade of purple. It was a testament to love and family. But a county official, clearly offended by anything more vibrant than beige, declared the barn to be visual pollution. Deputies were dispatched to charge the old man with nuisance color usage. Earl fought the charge and refused to repaint his barn. It remained defiantly purple, a beautiful tribute to his granddaughter that also served as a giant, colorful middle finger to the most miserable killjoy in the entire state. 9. In Boston, a cyclist named Nora decided to pimp her ride with a battery-free Pac-Man-style reflector maze on her spokes. It was a brilliant, low-tech way to increase visibility and add a touch of retro cool. But a traffic officer with zero appreciation for 80s arcade classics saw it as a public menace. Nora was accused of deploying an unauthorized lighting device. To be clear, a device that has no power source and simply reflects existing light. They didn't just give her a warning, they confiscated the entire wheel as evidence, leaving her with a very expensive and now very useless unicycle. Her commute home was presumably a long, slow, one-pedaled drag. 10. A Boise beekeeper named Emma was doing a neighborly good deed, safely relocating a swarm of honeybees from a backyard. But to other residents, a box full of bees looked less like environmental stewardship and more like a low-budget horror movie. They called 911 to report a suspicious buzzing box. Responding officers arrested Emma for moving hazardous insects without the proper permit. The bees, blissfully unaware of their new status as a controlled substance, simply continued their unauthorized flight operations, presumably to find a less bureaucratic place to live. 11. While jogging in an Atlanta park, Chris committed a truly heinous act. He paused to take a quick drink from a public water fountain. Park rangers, who must have been having a slow day, witnessed this blatant theft of public resources. They cited him for theft of city utilities, water. Yes, you heard that correctly. The human need for hydration is now a crime. The resulting fine was reportedly more than his entire monthly utility bill, proving once and for all that in Atlanta, even a sip of water from a public fountain is a luxury service. 12. In Rochester, an illustrator named Mia was sitting on a public sidewalk, sketching the columns of the courthouse for practice. A deputy, paranoid that she was casing the joint with a pencil, decided this was a major security breach. He claimed her drawing was unauthorized architectural recording, seized her notepad, and issued a citation. Her simple charcoal doodle, likely destined for her portfolio, now resides in an evidence locker. It might just be the first still life drawing in history to require a defense attorney. 13. During a cold Chicago day, marathoner Leah found the sidewalk on her route dangerously iced over. So she briefly jogged on the closed shoulder of Lakeshore Drive to stay safe. State troopers, however, saw this as an act of vehicular anarchy. They stopped traffic, cuffed her, and booked her for improper pedestrian on a controlled highway. Her impressive average mile time took a significant hit that day, thanks to the addition of a much slower station house split. Safety, it seems, is no excuse for breaking the unspoken rules of pavement. 14. Ben, a Seattle coder, found his laptop running low on power while working in a park. He spotted an outlet on a light pole and plugged in his extension cord. A simple solution, right? Wrong. City workers saw this as a high-tech heist and accused him of theft of municipal electricity. They called the police, and Ben was driven to the station for booking, clutching the incriminating 3-meter extension cord. The ultimate irony? As he was being arrested, his laptop battery was still at a paltry 12%. 15. For Pride Week in Portland, an artist named Leo added some flair to the city's bike lanes by painting discreet, tasteful rainbow stripes. It was a simple gesture of celebration. But the city was not celebrating. By dawn, city crews had scrubbed the rainbows away, and police cited Leo for alteration of traffic control devices. He was escorted to a holding cell, likely still smelling of latex paint and good intentions. In Portland, you can do a lot of things, but apparently, making the bike lanes fabulous is not one of them. 16. An activist in Portland named Sam set up a free community fridge on his lawn, filling it with books and non-perishable food for anyone in need. It was a beautiful act of charity. But to zoning inspectors, it was an illegal enterprise. Escorted by police, they seized the refrigerator and charged Sam with operating an unlicensed retail kiosk. Apparently, giving things away for free now requires a business license, a commercial zoning permit, and probably a team of corporate lawyers. 17. In Seattle, a resident named Priya used chalk to write uplifting quotes on her own driveway. It was harmless, temporary, and meant to brighten people's day. A neighbor, however, was not uplifted and filed a complaint. Police arrived, photographed the pastel-colored evidence of her positivity, and issued a citation for graffiti. The rain washed the crime scene away before the citation paperwork was even printed, but Priya was still on the hook for a $175 fine. A costly lesson that unsolicited optimism is frowned upon in the damp city. 18. A Pittsburgh sculptor named Alex used a snow day to carve a magnificent 6-foot-tall dinosaur in front of his house. The neighborhood kids loved it. The city code enforcers, not so much. They officially designated the snow Rex as a potential obstructive structure. Officers took photos for their report and issued Alex a nuisance citation. He was then arrested when he tried to argue his case while attempting to place a tiny pair of mittens on the dinosaur's tiny frozen arms. 19. Some college pranksters in Spokane thought it would be funny to create a free library of amusing bumper stickers on the city's parking meters. It was a harmless joke, but city code enforcers, who are biologically immune to humor, labeled each sticker as defacement of a regulatory surface. Campus police were called in to ticket and arrest the trio. The jokes on the bumper stickers probably got more laughs than the story the officers told back at the station. 20. At a memorial service in Louisville, a family released biodegradable sky lanterns to honor a loved one. It was a touching, solemn moment. However, fire officials had apparently attached GPS tags to the lanterns. They tracked the family down and cited the entire group for releasing airborne ignition sources. They even detained Grandpa, who had meticulously read the safety instructions out loud twice before the launch. As he was led away, he was heard sighing. I guess release and let go was more of a suggestion. 21. Dana, a Brooklyn filmmaker, was using her phone to take some still photos of subway art for a class project. To transit cops, a person taking pictures was clearly a big-shot Hollywood producer trying to cheat the system. They accused her of having commercial intent, seized her phone as evidence, and arrested her for not having an unpaid location permit. In the end, Dana spent more money on MetroCard swipes just to travel back and forth to retrieve her phone than the actual fine itself. 22. A Milwaukee teen named Ethan was walking downtown wearing saggy basketball shorts. A local ordnance officer, apparently the town's official fashion police, decided this was a crime against humanity. Ethan was cited for indecent display of underwear and detained for an hour while officers measured the precise angle of his waistband droop. Ethan now refers to the incident as the single most expensive and time-consuming fashion critique he has ever received. 23. Having forgotten his headphones, a Nashville commuter named Ray softly whistled "Sweet Caroline" to himself on a quiet city bus. A transit marshal overheard this public display of melody and cited him for giving an unlicensed performance. The situation escalated when another passenger complained the tune was emotionally coercive, leading to Ray being detained at the next stop. He now only whistles jingles for personal injury lawyers, figuring that at least falls under fair use. 24. During a camping talk in Flagstaff, an astronomer named Nina used a green laser pointer to trace constellations for the group. It's a common practice. but a Forest Patrol officer mistook the pinprick of light for an attempt to harass wildlife. Her laser pointer was confiscated, and Nina was detained for questioning. The campers were left to stare up at the sky, filled with beautiful but now officially unnamed stars, as if they were all in the Witness Protection Program. 25. In Quincy, Massachusetts, fortune-telling without a permit is illegal. So when college student Mira did a casual tarot card reading for friends at a local cafe, she unknowingly broke the law. Undercover bylaws officers suddenly appeared at her table, accused her of unlawful divination, and wrote her an arrest summons. The ironic part? The last card she pulled for herself was the Tower, which signifies a sudden, disruptive event involving authority figures. The cards weren't wrong. 26. A Phoenix hobbyist named Arjun folded a paper airplane and sent it gliding through the air. Unfortunately, its flight path took it over the fence of a police substation. Officers inside spotted the unidentified flying object and scrambled into action. They flagged it as an aerial intrusion, carefully scanned it for explosives or contraband, and then booked Arjun for flying an unregistered aircraft. The plane's dangerous cargo? A tiny hand-drawn doodle of a smiley face wearing aviator sunglasses. 27. In Phoenix, where summer sidewalks can practically cook an egg, a resident named Stan tried to be a good neighbor. He lightly sprayed the public sidewalk in front of his house with a garden hose to cool it down for people walking their dogs. A city water patrol officer witnessed this act of mercy and cited him for unauthorized alteration of a public surface's thermal properties and wasting water. Police were called to detain him, leaving the concrete to return to its natural, flesh-searing temperature, as God and the city council intended. 28. Playing the blues in Memphis should be as natural as breathing. But for a guitarist named Riley, it turned into a legal nightmare. He was outside the historic Sun Studio, riffing for a small crowd of tourists, when a plainclothes officer approached. The officer didn't want a request. He wanted to invent a new crime on the spot. Riley was cited for creating intellectual property ambience. Yes, the very vibe of the music was apparently a copyright infringement. He was ordered to cease his performance and then booked. It's a strange world when the very act that made a landmark famous is now illegal to perform in its shadow. 29. Sometimes trying to be a helpful citizen can land you in handcuffs. In Tallahassee, an activist named Josh got tired of the city's potholes. So he took some chalk and drew clear outlines around them, adding hashtags to get City Hall's attention. The police response was swift. They didn't come to thank him. They came to arrest him for creating political graffiti. After detaining him, the city sent a crew to power wash his chalk outlines away. The beautiful irony? The power washing left the potholes themselves perfectly clean and still dangerously deep, a pristine monument to government priorities. 30. Denver's Little Art Box was a wonderful idea, a public box where strangers could swap tiny original pieces of art. It was a beacon of community creativity until the postal inspectors got involved. One miniature canvas included a collage that used a real 1-cent stamp. This was deemed counterfeit postage. The inspectors called the police, who arrested the box's curator. It was a case of art imitating life, but apparently, when it comes to imitating federal postage, even for a single penny in a piece of art, the authorities have absolutely no sense of humor. 31. During the major total eclipse in Wyoming, a science teacher, Mr. Jacobs, was doing his job, safely educating his students. He projected the sun's image onto a school wall, allowing everyone to watch the celestial event without damaging their eyes. A park ranger on eclipse duty, however, saw this as a grave danger. He threatened Mr. Jacobs with site safety violations and filed a report for use of an unauthorized optical device. Police then escorted the teacher away, ironically blocking the children's only safe method of viewing the very thing they were all there to see. 32. You'd think brewing tea using the free power of the sun would be the most harmless hobby imaginable. For Glenn, a retiree in Tampa, It was a peaceful pastime. He'd place large gallon jars of water and tea bags on his driveway to steep. But the health department saw something sinister. They labeled his solar tea operation as a form of uncontrolled pasteurization. Deputies were dispatched to bring Glenn in for questioning about his flagrant disregard for food safety laws. The tea continued to steep into local legend, while Glenn was left to stew in a bureaucratic mess. 33. While hiking in New Hampshire, a nature lover named Elise picked a single, beautiful wildflower to press in a book. It was a tiny memento from her day. Suddenly, a forest ranger appeared as if from nowhere, a botanical ninja in full uniform. He cited her for the removal of state flora, a crime usually reserved for illegal logging operations. He then summoned deputies to handle the hardened criminal. When the flower was later presented as evidence, it had wilted, a perfect metaphor for how a simple, innocent act can die under the crushing weight of overzealous regulation. 34. A baker in Albuquerque named Ramon noticed kids getting bored while waiting in line outside his shop. So he drew a simple hopscotch grid on the sidewalk with chalk. The city's risk management department immediately flagged this fun-inducing drawing as an unmitigated trip hazard. The police were called to issue a citation, and Ramon was taken downtown, his clothes still dusted with the chalk of his crime. The hopscotch grid, a threat to public safety, was later scrubbed away by a risk-averse rainstorm. 35. There's a law in Helena, Montana that bars loose livestock in town. So when a homesteader named Jeanette led her 2 pet goats, both wearing festive Santa hats for a quick holiday photo, she thought nothing of it. The police, however, viewed this adorable scene as a major public order offense. They cited her for holding a festive livestock parade without a permit, and then booked her. Her goats, the unindicted co-conspirators, reportedly left unrepentant hoofprints on the backseat of the police cruiser. 36. Arthur, a retiree in a New York City park, enjoyed the simple pleasure of feeding pigeons from a small bag of seeds. It was a scene straight out of a movie. But a park enforcement officer saw it differently. Arthur was approached and written a summons for unlicensed distribution of foodstuffs to non-human urban residents. When Arthur argued the absurdity of the charge, he was arrested for disorderly conduct. The pigeons, now key witnesses in an illegal birdseed ring, scattered before they could be questioned. 37. In the quiet hills of Boulder, a meditation guru named Raj rang a small handheld bell to signal the start of a dawn session. The gentle chime was meant to bring peace. But to nearby wildlife officers, it was an auditory assault on nature. They ticketed him for disturbing elk during calving season. When Raj tried to argue that the tiny bell was hardly a disturbance, he was arrested. The nearby elk, the supposed victims of this crime, merely blinked at the commotion before continuing to chew their breakfast, utterly undisturbed. 38. Homeowners associations are a special kind of battleground, but this one from Scottsdale takes the cake. A resident named Faith, wanting to show support during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, bedazzled her mailbox in pink rhinestones. The beige-loving overlords of the HOA were not amused. Instead of sending a sternly worded letter, they called the sheriffs. Officers arrived and issued a misdemeanor citation for an unapproved structural embellishment. They even dusted the mailbox for prints, which proved difficult as Faith's rhinestones held fast, sparkling defiantly against the forces of suburban conformity. 39. An Anchorage teacher named Carl had a passion for astrophotography. He set up a simple camera trap in his yard, pointed skyward, hoping to capture the ethereal dance of the northern lights. Unfortunately, nearby airport security detected the lens. Their minds immediately jumped not to wonder, but to suspicion of illegal drone activity. Local police detained Carl for owning unregistered surveillance equipment. While he was inside answering questions about his supposed high-tech spy gear, the Aurora Borealis put on a spectacular, unphotographed show, its beauty completely invisible to a man trapped by groundless paranoia. 40. A group of high schoolers in Boise came up with a clever charity event. a reverse car wash, where they dried already washed cars for donations. It was wholesome and ingenious, but parking enforcement officials saw it as a violation of city squeegee ordinances. Think about that. An ordinance about applying water was used against people removing it. They were arrested for unlicensed cleaning, and the authorities confiscated their entire arsenal of 200 microfiber cloths. Those towels are now presumably sitting in a city evidence locker, the softest, most absorbent contraband in Boise history. 41. In a Miami Park gazebo, a barber named Julio was doing something wonderful, giving free haircuts to local foster kids. But this act of pure kindness was a major problem for code compliance. They arrived on the scene, seized Julio's clippers, classifying them as an unregulated medical device, and police issued him a citation. The kids were forced to leave with their haircuts half-finished. The city's official suggestion? That the children visit a licensed salon, assuming, of course, they had the money for a service they were just getting for free. 42. When a skater in Tulsa named Max waxed a public ledge to make it grindable, he probably expected to get yelled at by a security guard. He did not expect to get arrested. Park police swooped in and cited him for the application of a foreign lubricant. They handcuffed him and solemnly logged the small bar of skate wax into the evidence system, as if it were a brick of cocaine. In a final act of incompetence, the officers forgot to wipe the ledge clean, leaving it ungrindable, sticky, and a perfect monument to their pointless arrest. 43. The scene was a closed mall parking lot in St. Louis, where a mom named Carrie had organized a charity stroller derby. It was adorable chaos for a good cause. But mall security, terrified of liability, called the police. The St. Louis Police Department responded by issuing citations for holding an unlawful vehicular event. The primary vehicles in question? Strollers. Carrie was arrested, but not before the race concluded. The toddlers officially finished first, crossing the finish line utterly confused by the flashing lights, but technically undefeated champions. 44. On the frozen surface of Lake Nokomis in Minneapolis, a dad named Omar set up a portable sauna tent for a little winter relaxation. It's a classic Minnesota move. The park police, however, were not impressed by his ingenuity. They deemed the tent an unregistered winter structure, fined him, and then dragged the entire sauna ashore to be impounded as evidence. Omar's therapeutic afternoon steam session was instantly transformed into a literal cold case, another victim of the war on unauthorized fun. 45. A surfer on Daytona Beach named Nate was doing some routine maintenance, repairing a ding on his board with a bit of epoxy right there on the sand. Lifeguards, seeing the small tube of resin, declared a full-blown chemical hazard situation. They issued Nate a misdemeanor and detained him. The board, only half repaired, now hangs on his living room wall. It serves as a glossy, resin-coated shrine to the time he was arrested for fixing a surfboard on the one place on Earth where surfboards are supposed to be. 46. In Manhattan, a dog walker named Mel had a simple idea to help her community. She strapped a bundle of biodegradable waste bags to a lamppost for public use. But a sanitation officer saw this not as a public service, but as an illegal act of sanitation interference. She was slapped with a violation, and police wrote her an arrest citation for creating an unauthorized dispenser. The ultimate irony? The city workers then took all the perfectly good, unused bags and threw them directly into a city trash can. 47. A tour guide in Charleston decided to spice up his historical spiel with some Hamilton-style rap verses. Tourists loved the fresh take on history. City regulators, however, did not. Citing a dusty, colonial-era ordinance against busking, they arrested him right in the middle of a rhyming couplet about the Civil War. His arrest for an unauthorized performance was caught on dozens of tourist videos, which, you could argue, ended up being the most memorable and authentic history lesson of the day. 48. At a rest stop in New Jersey, twins Paige and Parker thought it would be fun to organize a flash mob kazoo tribute to Bruce Springsteen. For 90 glorious seconds, the air was filled with the buzzing sound of Born to Run. State troopers, however, were not fans. They shut down the Harmony, citing it as a motorist distraction. Page and Parker were arrested for holding an unlicensed musical assembly. They were, it turns out, born to run, just not away from a state trooper with no appreciation for the kazoo. 49. A fisherman in Pensacola named Daryl was a good sportsman. He caught an undersized redfish and, as the law requires, he released it unharmed. He even posted a TikTok video of the release to prove he was following the rules. This is where things get insane. Wildlife officers saw the video and accused him of evidence tampering. Their logic? By letting the fish go, he had prevented them from officially measuring it. He was arrested right there on the dock. The redfish is still at large and has presumably ignored all subpoenas to appear in court. All right, here's your assignment. In the comments, describe the most ridiculously legal thing you could get arrested for in your town. The most pathetic, soul-crushing example of bureaucratic nonsense wins. If this festival of stupidity was your kind of entertainment, crush the like button and subscribe because the well of pointless arrests never ever runs dry.